All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Today we have a guest, a mutual, I guess they would say, Hudden. And well, give us your backstory, Hudden, but I think we're going to use that as a jumping off point to talk about the red pill and what it is and our experiences with it and what worked, what didn't, the dark side, the good side. How's that sound? I'm
Sounds a
asking
little
myself.
sounds good, maybe a little bit daunting. I was a little worried when you brought that up as a topic for us to discuss on your podcast because I was like, oh shoot, maybe I am a red pill account still, or maybe
Well, no,
that's
I
the
bring that up because you make, I was just looking through what you post on Twitter and just seeing common themes. And you seem to be doing a very good job, at least from my perspective, because I agree with you 100%. I've been this discussion is going to be a mutual admiration society kind of discussion, but
sure.
yeah, you're just pointing out, look, these guys on Twitter who have a lot of followers and they talk about psychology and mindset like they know what they're talking about, but they really don't. I very much liken it to like the 22-year-old guy who's given diety advice on how to lose weight. It's like, dude, you don't understand. Yeah, when you're 22, all you have to do is like cut back on Starburst sometimes, and you'll probably get down to 10% body fat. And that's fine for your perspective in life now, but there's another layer to this. Yeah, I guess that analogy works well. Because I think the red pill is like, well, how would you describe the red pill? And yeah, talk about your background with it.
Yeah, so my background essentially is that I was kind of in a bad spot and I had gone through a nasty breakup, which I know a lot of guys, that's how they kind of find the red pill. And essentially some of the preconceptions or misconceptions I had about the world and women and myself were shattered kind of like overnight. I had sort of a naive opinion that um, a woman could or should love me unconditionally, outside of like some sort of a, mutually beneficial relationship. I just thought that maybe it's the generation I was raised in, but I sort of had like a Disney view of the opposite sex in a certain way. And I basically went to the internet and I think I literally Googled something pathetic like, how could she fall out of love with me? I didn't think this was possible. And I mean, that's how I didn't know it was the red pill at the time, but that's how I found the first, blog or post or whatever it was that led me to that kind
And
of
who did
community.
you find? Was it the rational male kind of thing?
Yeah, Roosh and the Rational Male. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you learned, oh wait, maybe a woman's not just gonna love me for who I am, and that's gonna be it.
Right,
And then if she doesn't love me, then she's a bad person. Maybe that's not how it works.
right. Like, unfortunately, and I think this is kind of what we're here to talk about today, I didn't learn at that time to take the responsibility onto myself and sort of introspect necessarily. I think that event began that process, but the red pill was more directed at blaming women rather than blaming themselves or looking introspectively at themselves, I think.
Yeah, and what I remember my point of the rational male being is he tells you like you got to be alpha and all these things, but there's really not a good explication. This is another thing we agree on. There's really no explication on the how,
Mm,
right? Where's the how? How do you do this? How do you go about doing this? And I think what a lot of guys, well, when they do look into the how for that, it's a set of techniques and games that you can play with women. That's the extent of it.
yep.
And that can be really powerful. And guys can easily get addicted to it because it really does work. Like you can push and pull women and run all this game and all these techniques and whatever. Like dread game,
Mm,
obviously that stuff can really work. Nobody says it doesn't work, but that's the problem is it works and it leaves you emotionally unable to handle a real relationship with women. So I think you see the detritus of that on Twitter now of these guys posting these memes about how you could go into monk mode and your wife has to be these 10 things and if she doesn't hit all these markers then you're a total simp and she's been with 100 guys and all this stuff. And yeah, I guess I kind of got off on a tangent there, but
The scripts and things work to a point because they work. They let you know that they work, so they let you know there's something there. There's something true about what these people are saying, but they only work on a certain segment of the population that's kind of like your reflection of your own issue and your own negativity at the same time, right?
yeah, it's going to work on women who typically are anxiously attached.
Mm.
And oh, she's going to be crazy, and then you're going to say all women are like this. Well, it's
Yeah,
like, no, you just met her at a club and you only had the courage to go talk to her because you had 4.5 beers in you. And then you're just running all this game. You weren't even in the relationship. And she had this crazy reaction. And she has her issues too. But to generalize that out to all women, and yeah, it's amazing. Like the question I pose to guys often is, if they don't have a girlfriend, is where would your future girlfriend be now? And they give some answer. And it's like, when's the last time you've been there? And like openly talking to women in that kind of area. And it's just like, oh yeah, I guess I haven't really thought of it that way. But
yeah. I always say game works on women who would steal your wallet. That's how you know game will work on this girl. Because you trick her into coming back to your place, and you wake up the next morning and you may or may not have a wallet still, in your apartment or whatever. Um,
yeah,
but but yeah, that's kind of that's how I got there, and I think there's a larger point to be made about where we're at as a society as a reflection of these sexual dynamics. They call it the sexual marketplace, but it's interesting to me, like on Twitter, where we're mutuals, that almost everybody talks about dating, whether they are 50 and liberal, 49 and hardcore conservative, they're right wing, they're left wing. It's everybody's constantly talking about these dating dynamics because it plays out so consistently in our culture, and it doesn't matter if people are single or married. They're always interested in what the kids are saying on the apps together. How are they being glib today? Are they being honest? Are they joking? Are they using scripts? It's interesting how much focus we put as a society on the dating scene.
yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know who said it, but you're not going to end wars between nations until you end the war between the sexes. And I think a lot of what we see going on now is, political mayhem, whatever, war in the Middle East. A lot of this stuff is cultural. Like there's just a different cultural view. And, I think that's why we latch on to Israel Palestine, is because that's like a good representation of that. Israel being the West and Palestine being, um, what would it be? Palestine being whatever is opposed to the West. It's like, I always say it's like just civilization based on agriculture versus civilization based on hunter gathering. I mean, that's really what the fundamental
Right.
conflict comes down to. And I think that you have a lot of conflict in Israel Palestine is because they just don't even have the same terms in their mind of what's going on. Um, I don't think they view like an individual human the same, so they're going to have just a totally different perspective. And there's just a lack of appreciation of how like two different cultures are. How did I get here?
We were just I made a bad leap to the sort of larger cultural uh, commentary on the dating market, but um, the red pill is essentially, and they hate this label, they hate being called this, but they are essentially a reaction to the feminist movement. I mean, that's what people call them. They call them male feminists, and that's essentially what it is. They do teach gimmick, but
No, no,
they
it's not. It's not that though, because they really are oppressed. That's what makes it different. Women
the
aren't.
right,
Right?
right,
I get that reaction all the time.
right.
Well,
The
well, that's
men,
what you have to do. I mean, that's what feminism wanted. It was a reaction to so-called oppression from the patriarchy, and
mhm.
that's what red pill is. It's a reaction to so-called, from the matriarchy, from misandry. I don't know. Everybody thinks they're a victim,
Right.
right? It's like this was like maybe 10 years ago now, but like the question of whether jokes should punch down. It's like nobody thinks they're punching down when they're making jokes. Like nobody thinks that. It's all the story you have in your head. And
Mm,
everybody has their own story about how they're oppressed, which really I don't think that's about really being oppressed. It's just, psychological issues displayed as like a cultural conversation. Um, but yeah, well, there's just a lot of lack of awareness in the red pill. Just same thing with feminists, of course. And yeah, yeah, but really, it's like this general theme of being emotionally tuned out because yeah, I think guys go to the red pill when like they're emotionally dead, like that they're just parched and
mhm,
something maybe really really bad happened. Usually their girlfriend left them. I mean, usually it's like the second girlfriend because you need 2 points to make a pattern. And so they're really in a terrible place. And rather than say, oh, you got to do the emotional work to really learn how to connect with this woman, because chances are you had like all these implicit games you were playing. The red pill essentially teaches you to kill that part off completely,
mm.
which is alluring because that does work better than being somewhat emotionally tuned in, but not really having a good understanding what's going on. It is easier short term to just cut off the emotional part completely. You get a lot of power that can feel really good and that gets addictive, but it's going to hinder you 5 or 10 years down the line. Uh, it's going to make it very difficult to have a true relationship with a woman and not just project all these crazy fantasies you have of ultimately mom taking care of you. And
Mm.
uh, yeah. Okay. So you got to the red pill, you were emotionally hurt and you learned exactly that. I mean, would you put it in that terms? I mean, guys wouldn't put it in that terms, but effectively, I think that's what's going on.
Oh yeah, I was emotionally hurt. I was ashamed. I have a very close family. I couldn't even go to like family Christmas that year because I was just afraid to like let anybody see me because I was such a failure. I found some excuse not to go. Um,
Hmm.
and that's what the red pill offers is you go online and you find this community that's like a salve for your wounds, and it tells you that somebody else is it's their fault, and here's all these great examples. And I think the really tricky thing about the red pill is they make you think
Divorce
you're
rate. That's my favorite term. Sorry.
they pioneered some of the best
Sorry.
terms in the
I, you were saying,
no
but yeah, they
no
teach you it's women's fault and not to
yeah.
take any responsibility.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say. The tricky thing is that you think you are taking responsibility when you're there. You think that by
Right.
lifting weights or eating a certain way
You're
or
right. Yeah, that's a
running
great point.
scripts and stuff, you think you're doing the right thing. It's the rate between red pill and stoic is almost the crossover is almost 100% because you're like you say you're just cutting off one part of yourself and then focusing like you're on that mountaintop. They even call that's the funny thing about the red pill is that they call everything. They coined a lot of these terms, so you're literally using the perfect term. Like you go up on the mountaintop and seclude yourself for 30 days or 90 days or whatever. I mean,
Monk
you
mode,
monk mode. Yeah, you feel
demon
like you're doing
retention.
you feel like you're doing
Which,
the right
which, by
thing.
the way, a lot of this stuff, like guys can get into it. It can be really helpful,
Mm,
And there is a problem with watching porn every day. I mean, there's guys who are just glued to porn for 3 hours a day, and that's just normal life. So yeah, I mean, these things are. We can argue all day whether sex addiction is real, but yeah, that's a great point. I often say you can't really take responsibility for your situation until you take responsibility for the emotions around the situation. And to a 25-year-old man, that can just cutting off emotions can really feel like taking responsibility because emotions are irrational anyway. And what's the point? That's chick crap.
mm.
And that's not even their fault because they came from an education system that didn't teach them anything else. And psychology is run, I won't say by women, but by people who, promulgate, chick crap, mindfulness meditation being, one example of this.
I mean,
Um,
I
yeah.
remember my mother, who is not a feminist or anything close to that. I remember my mother telling me I needed to be more in touch with my feminine side growing up. You know, and that was just something that she thought was correct or true. Like the right thing, quote unquote. I called it the Disney view of love because that's how we kind of thought the world worked in a certain in a certain milieu, I guess.
Like say more about that. Because I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but I'm sorry. I'll get into my story, but what exactly do you mean by that? Like, if you just love a woman enough, then she should love you, and if she doesn't, then she's a bad person. Something close to that.
I don't think I ever had the misconception that um, if I loved a woman, she would love me back. But if I did a list of certain things, like I met these certain responsibilities, and we entered into some sort of a relationship, that there would be uh, some sort of forever love that was outside of a mutually beneficial exchange, I guess. And I do think there is some of that. I mean, I do think, obviously I'm married now and I have a much closer, more intimate relationship than I've ever had in my life. But um, a lot of guys get red pilled when they see that a woman that they thought one day loved them can go be with another man the next day, or leave them because they get in bad financial situation, or any of a thousand
Hypergamy.
hypergamy. And the thing is the red pill is so insidious because a lot of the things they say is real. I saw in real time that they talk about the female id, how it's almost like a rationalization hamster that's sort of working out ahead of them, and like they by the time you find out something is happening, they're already like 3 months down the road, and because women do have sort of a natural decision making process where they have like a emotionally intuitive process where they almost arrive at a decision sometimes after the train has already left the station, and you can see and so
Yeah, it's called chick logic.
yeah, but the red
That's
pill,
that's.
it's amazing. It really is. It's an amazing thing. But
I
the
mean,
red
guys do
pill,
it too. I'm not. You know. Anyway, I don't think I have to qualify all the offensive things I say.
right? And I'm not trying to be offensive either. I mean, but they really do a good job of pointing out and diagnosing these things, and you go, "Oh man, this is all real. This is all real." And then
Right.
by the time you're into it deeply, you can see how guys get stuck there forever, and they're 40, 50, and they're still complaining about women, complaining about 20-year-old women, and they're in their 50s and 60s, and it's pathetic.
Yeah. Um. I mean, that's MGTOW. Guys who are dead are openly never going to get married because they think it's just a rigged system against them. And it's unfortunate. Like, like I'm of two minds. I want to make fun of red pill guys, but also I really empathize with them. And I went through my own kind of thing. This stuff really wasn't around. The internet wasn't around probably when I was um going through my difficulty with women. I mean, not nearly to the same extent. Maybe the stuff was on forums, but
Right.
um yeah, I mean, you can point out real examples. And I see, this is a problem all the time that I see. I call it propaganda bias. Right? I mean, people think propaganda works through lies and deception. Well, deception maybe, but it's not lies. It's all the truth. Good propaganda is the truth. They get the facts right, but it's all about what facts do you focus on, for what end. And what guys don't realize is their end is, if I open up again, if I become emotionally vulnerable, I'm going to be hurt.
Mm.
That's the end. And they don't realize that they're just looking at the facts that feed into that end. And the whole time they're thinking, oh, I'm being logical, I'm being rational. And you're not. You're rationalizing, right? You're still making excuses for yourself. You're still being a victim. You just have a clever way of doing it. Now, on top of it, you can go out to the bar at 1 a.m. and run game on some girl, and it can work. You
Mm-hmm.
can be spinning plates. I have no doubt that most guys, if they're not handsome enough, they can get themselves to a place where they're handsome enough if they work on themselves where they can start spinning plates.
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's like, your nose is where your forehead is supposed to be. But that's, rare stuff. And yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is they're just as emotional as they always were. They're just not aware of it. But again, I think there's this whole level called relating with the opposite sex that, I mean, there's people out there talking about it, but I guess it just doesn't offer all the same short-term benefits. I mean, I think it does, but anyways, that's why I do what I do, at least, and that's why I'm on here talking with you about this, because I do think there's a better way, and most guys would be happy to know that. And
Well,
yeah,
and not to go off topic again, but go back to your Israel Palestine analogy. It's the perfect analogy because both sides of the gender wars right now are launching bombs at each other. I mean, it's not like
right.
to defend the red pill guys a little bit. I mean, they're getting hit with rockets. They're getting hit with missiles from the other side. There's nobody in the women camp that I've seen, and I've had a lot of gal friends over the years, gal pals, whatever you want to call them, that have been sort of red pill adjacent or dating themselves or dating coaches, and there's not anybody from the on the other side that I've seen that's really doing a much better job in the chip camp. I would say they're escalating it to the nth degree. Like if the guys go out and they start running game and they start negging girls, the girls come back and they start, they're doing the same thing. They're reciprocating and they're just getting tougher and tougher. So I don't really see either side sort of de-escalating the gender war right now.
Yeah, well, it's tribal at this point. You're in it for the group as opposed to the individual, and the point of tribalism is conflict. I mean, I look at it, Israel Palestine, and I think, oh no, this is the goal. The goal is exactly what is happening right now. The peace is not the goal of tribalism. If peace was your goal, you would let go of the tribalism, right? You would figure out a way around that. That's not really your goal. You want conflict, and I think it's the same thing when in the war between the sexes. Um, yeah, if yeah, I'll just yeah, send missiles your way, and then I don't have to look at my poor communication issues, or how I basically don't have a personality, and like my personality is based off game, is based off like pushing emotional buttons in girls. And yeah,
Yeah.
so right, so you were emotionally tuned out, you got to the red pill. And so like when did you first start to realize, oh, maybe this isn't that helpful?
It was actually with the group of guys that I had met sort of in some of those communities and stuff. I mean, um, I would say pretty normal guys that I think were able to keep themselves just grounded enough to sort of peer through, the mist. I don't really know. I always have joked that the healthiest guys that come across red pill content, they're only there for about 10 minutes because they see it and they're like, oh, these people are all freaks and they're out of there. Guys like myself that maybe take you, a couple of years or something, we're somewhere between, somewhere in the middle, not super healthy, but not the world's most craven person that's ever walked the earth. But I eventually formed a group of guys, and we started talking about this stuff and sort of, I think what it was just, it was like group, essentially is what it was. We started talking about, well, what got me here, and why do I keep repeating this pattern over and over. Guys are really good at that pattern recognition stuff.
Yeah.
For me, that's always what's kind of dragged me out of my slumps is pattern recognition. Like, being open to even some of the psychology work that I've done with you and stuff like that. I recognize that I'm in this pattern and I repeat these behaviors over and over, and there's something there that I don't have control over. And there's just like that grain of nugget that I always was able to cling to. And that's what happened kind of in the red pill. It's like, well, no, I don't want to be in a relationship where, I'm with a girl that's essentially a doormat and I'm like this super, super dominant, presence all the time. And I don't want to live that persona. And I never hated women, which, to be honest, there's a lot of guys in the red pill that I think probably do either hate or have some sort of real, dislike for women.
There's a lot of resentment there.
There's a lot of resentment there. And I think that was the crack in the door, was just sort of when you can start seeing the differences between yourselves and other people that are maybe in the same space with you, and you're kind of like, yeesh. And then also just sort
Yeah.
of looking at your own patterns and stuff like that. So
Yeah, like toxic behavior, that feeling of being around toxic behavior.
yeah,
Even if the guy's pointing out true facts about divorce statistics and everything, it doesn't mean it's not toxic. you can still be right, and there's legitimacy in that. We're not denying that that's important, but there can still be this toxic nature to it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right about the divorce statistics, but why haven't you had a job in 15 years? you know what's the disconnect here? There just wasn't a lot of what we'll
Right.
call super well-rounded people, you know.
Yeah, well, there's always something you can latch on to. That's what's so great about Twitter. It's like, I'm like starting to see. I wake up in the morning, like you're getting out of, whatever dream state you had that was, putting you face to face with your emotional situation. Like your unconscious made a movie to tell you what was going on, and you're you're coming out of that fog, and you're like, well, I'm just gonna go to Twitter to see like what's going on. And like I saw today, it was like that family stealing, candy,
Oh
like,
my
right.
gosh.
Oh, that's the thing that I'm gonna look at and say, oh, look, that's bad. Yeah, that is bad, and whatever. Like, but it's also bad to use that as a distraction from the fact that you are, well, I don't know if you're in control of your life, but if anybody is in control of your life, it's you.
Right.
And I think there might be some like emotional pain there if you're constantly looking at this family who's stealing this Halloween candy. Um, Yeah. So there's just a lot of good distraction there. Okay. So you notice toxic behavior, right? Yeah, I see that with a lot of the Israel Palestine thing. Like I don't want to say who's right and who's wrong. I've heard both good I've heard good cases from both sides, but I've been around enough to know what's toxic behavior. And it just seems like really toxic behavior. I mean, not to be like a new age hippie about everything. Like I understand people are being killed, but um and I'm sorry about that, but I also know I'm not going to be able to do anything about it. It's like a a dispute across the street. Yeah, I'm sure there's a right side and the wrong side. I mean, what am I going to do about it? I'm sorry. Uh, okay. So started to notice toxic behavior, and then what happened?
You know, I think I spent more time around women than I probably had in a real meaningful way. Um, I dated girls I met online. Dated girls I met, out in gas stations. Dated girls that I worked with, and um, it was really helpful. I learned a lot about myself. I don't know how else to explain it, but I met girls that would teach me things a little bit about sort of even what I was interested in, and I'm not gonna claim that I was like super perfect or over all that stuff when I eventually met my wife, but um, I just I just did a lot of introspection. I went back and I I tried to take responsibility for what I was for what had happened in my life. I think that is the biggest sense I had, was that the experience I had taught me that I didn't know myself as well as I did, and I sort of was open to trying to figure out how I could have made such a big mistake, how I could have either been A, so naive, or B, gotten with somebody that was so, incompatible for, what my values were and those types of things. And I think dating kind of sorted some of that out, just because you learn about yourself as you're kind of going through the dating process.
Yeah, well, that's tough, to get yourself to the place where every relationship problem comes down to you, even if you're the one who chose this crazy person.
Mm-hmm.
What were you going through? Like, why? What emotional state were you going through to choose this crazy person? And yeah, I will take that to the nth degree of the woman in a relationship who's being beat up by her husband. Obviously, it's not her fault, right? And there needs to be punishment for that guy, of course. But it's so important in these cases to really take responsibility for everything that's going on, even if it isn't your fault. And that's really the rub. And I think where a lot of people get stuck in their growth is it's really, you know, because not everything's your fault. It's not. We're all like dealing with issues, family issues, especially that were literally here before we were born, and they're going to be here after we die. And we had no say in that. We just came into this world. We didn't ask for existence. It's just here.
Mm.
Um, and that's tough. But what else are it's just one of those things where I would never try to convince anybody of that. I just think that's something that I found that's something I've can can gradually see more and more as I, just go to therapy and talk through my emotions. I really think that's the only way. I mean, nothing I say here is going to convince anybody out there to take that mindset.
My experience with your content was that I was had prepared myself to a certain point to be open to those concepts essentially. Um, but what you said about taking responsibility, even in the circumstance of say a woman getting beat by her husband or something, I think that's one of the most controversial things that you potentially say, and that's hard for people to take on, is just understanding that every situation you find yourself in may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility to an extent. And if you can at least have the self-awareness to ask yourself how I got here, why do I keep repeating the same pattern? I always go back to the same patterns. But I think that's I think that's one of the hardest things because I mean, I've seen people come away from those situations and go right back into them and never ask themselves those questions and never do any type of introspection or even really because I mean I'm still trying to take responsibility. Like I mentioned earlier, you know, you say, well, what was the next phase out of the red pill? It's like, well, am I working that? Am I working on that? I mean, I'm not sure. I think I'm still in it right now because I mean, I'm still working on taking responsibility for myself. You know, when I look at, my wife
It's
and
never
her,
ending. Yeah.
and when I look at my wife and her issues, it's a reflection of me. Like a girl I dated, she had a guy, and this has been a couple of years ago now, but a girl I dated, she had another boyfriend, and he ended up doing some stuff, and it's like, oh my god, I see myself in this, and it's just it's interesting. Um, that's really the step that I think people have, whether it's red pill or therapy or feminism. And I don't know, maybe you can tell me, but I don't know what it is to get somebody to make that jump to be open to taking on, because if you can just start really really small with the smallest amount of holy crap, I am doing the same thing over and over. I am the common denominator here. What is it about me that is creating this event or creating this cycle or creating this habit? If you can just start with that smallest little door, that little piece, that's all you need because it grows from there. But I don't know how people go from not having that to feeling self-righteous and like the victim and everything they've ever done to then trying to develop that little morsel that kind of gets you to that next step.
It's connection. I mean, that's what does it. It's building relationships, and that's what I try to do with guys in therapy. Just start telling me about your life, telling me what's going on. Well, I know where we're going. We're planting that seed. We're going to get you there. I'm going to give you the process to get you there. But and also you need to be in a good amount of pain too. I think you need to notice those patterns and go through them for 5 or 6 or 7 years and go, okay, I'm back where I was when I was 24. This is crazy. I feel the same way. What's going on? Well, what's going on is you want to feel that way. That's exactly how you want to feel because it does something for you, and that's okay. We all do that. It's just really important to notice that. And it doesn't make any sense unless you have that feeling in there. Like I always say about the heroin addict. Like, why are you banging on this guy's door at 3 a.m.? Like, why are you waking up the neighbors? Why are you pooping in the gutter? Oh, you just insert heroin addiction, and then it just all makes sense. It just like holds everything together. And that's how we are with our emotional states. And yeah, man, you said it. I mean, people talk about responsibility all the time, but it's always implicitly responsibility for the situation. It's never responsibility for your emotional state. I would never ask a woman who's being beaten by her husband to take responsibility for the situation. I mean, that's horrendous. But your emotional state, that kind of victimhood you feel, that self pity, how you feel when you go to the women's shelter, wherever, you go for a few nights to your mother's house and you just dump and vent. That's all really important to you. And it's really, you got to recognize that. And it doesn't make what he's doing right, doesn't make what you're doing wrong. This is outside the realm of ethics. This is just probably old emotional patterns that have been there for a really long time. And we're all caught up in them. And the red pill is one of them. And the worst is when you think you're not being emotional at all and being super logical, and it's all based on emotion and just dysregulated stuff and resentment. And yeah.
Yeah, that's what makes the red pill so difficult, is because guys really do. I mean, you've said before, I mean, most guys are total sweethearts, right? I mean, the movies portray everybody is these potential
Oh yeah.
abusers. Every husband is, he's going to be a drunk, abusive alcoholic, and but I mean, most guys are really, really nice, for lack of a better word. And there's a lot of really nice guys that are in places like the red pill, but they think they're doing the right thing. They think that they're doing the right thing for themselves, for society, for women. Um,
Yeah.
and
It's,
they
oh, it's this game I that everybody's playing that I wasn't playing. I'll just play this game.
mhm.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you were saying.
No. I was just saying that that's what gets people there, keeps them there, and that's why these groups, these spaces have an outsized influence on culture, is because um, they have one of the things I was going to mention, what you've talked about it recently, but was evolutionary psychology. They bring in evolutionary psychology to the red pill and teach you about women's menstruation cycles, and how they wear different colored clothes during different points in their cycle, and how women, they can look in the past and they look at that's actually how we met. You probably don't remember, but I was talking about how some of the genomic stuff actually debunks the red pill, like how they've looked at ancient genomics and they've seen that actually most people, in our far past were basically monogamously pair bonded. Maybe it was for survival and not some sort of ethical or moral, but
Mm-hmm.
and I was, quote tweeting some of that stuff, but they bring in as many, and this is just a good example when you're talking about the broader culture, Israel, Palestine, Russia, Ukraine. They bring in all these examples to complicate the picture and to just completely convince you that you're doing the right thing morally, ethically. The data is there. Climate change, whatever they need. I mean, every one of these issues, it's all there, and it's. I mean, I don't know how anybody gets out of it, honestly.
Well, it's the problem of trying to use, I mean, science is great, but the problem is you use it to replace philosophy and psychology, and that's not going to work. We have two sides of the spectrum both saying, look, we have science on our side, like with Israel, Palestine, we have the facts on our side. And it's clearly that's not what it is. You're just using those facts because there's this emotional state in there. Yeah. I mean, whenever guys are talking about women and women this and women that, I really think the process of growth here is first you learn about women, which doesn't take that long. Then you learn about relationships, and that takes a little bit longer. Like what's relationship dynamics, and then it's really just talking about yourself because you see that the relationship and the woman are just a projection of issues you have anyway. I mean, it's it becomes clear the more and more you do this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, even the concept of, you said connection was sort of that thing that kind of gives you that spark, and I won't really go into the details of all the different things I went through during that phase of my life, because a lot of them were pathetic, embarrassing, and just all those things. But even the concept of connecting with people was almost a foreign concept to me. Uh, you talk about being an emotionally disconnected guy in your 20s. I mean, I was an emotionally disconnected guy into my early 30s. I mean, really, really, until I kind of met my wife, had children, and things started coming up for me that I could no longer repress or suppress, kind of that existential crisis that you've mentioned before. That's really what got the ball. I mean, I had some of the groundwork laid, but I think that's really what got the ball rolling for me. But even the concept of connecting with people, it sounded weird to me. It sounded foreign. I'm like, connect, like, what do you mean connect? Like talk about logistics, or I didn't understand. I didn't really understand, because I didn't grow up with it, right? So I didn't really even understand, what that meant. Like I was the prototypical cut the wire. You know, if there's a if your emotional life is sort of the check engine lights and all that, you know, I just cut the wire. You know, but eventually you really do. You and I've known guys that have this and nobody talks about it, but people have existential crises. People go to the hospital. Uh people have what they think is a heart attack in the middle of the street with their dad in the car. People go to the psychiatric ward for 2 or 3 days.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's not that uncommon, but nobody ever talks about it. Even people that are kind of in the self-help world, they're almost embarrassed to kind of bring up those things. But there really are some sort of rock bottom places that are not that uncommon for people.
Yeah. Well, that's when you start looking at yourself, or you're just in enough pain. And people have different pain thresholds. Some people can deal with a lifetime of pain and misery and stress, and it just feels normal to them. Other people get a little bit of it and like, oh, I got to change this. And you talk about your emotions being your responsibility, and they're like, yeah, whatever, just get me out of here, which is really good motivation at first. Long term, that's bad motivation, running away from the pain, but you need that at first, I think, because therapy is still a strange concept, and I think it always will be. People talk about stigma. Yeah, I think there's naturally always going to be stigma around therapy because it's weird. And but nothing like a few panic attacks on a Southwest flight to get you to I can't do this anymore. um oh yeah, I guess I'm like, what's connection? Yeah, I guess I'm not really talking to my dad. Or but yeah, I really think there's magic in connection, and I think religion tries to encapsulate that well. And I think it's very similar to what Christians at least talk about with the Holy Ghost or Holy Spirit. But it's really this enlivening thing that you go through, really, where and I just break down connection simply as write down what you don't say to a particular person in your life, and then spend a consistent amount of FaceTime with them. I know that sounds really autistic, but it's like this very nebulous concept, like, how do I get my connection? It's like, I just, compared it to the Holy Spirit. But, that's like, what do you not say to the important people in your life? And how are you not spending consistent FaceTime with them? And that'll get you through about 95% of it. Like, it's simple, but obviously it's very difficult. Um, and yeah, you just got to look at like all the pathetic things that you're doing, as you say. And yeah, me too. I like like all the nostalgia that I see in the Manosphere and the Red Pill, like the nostalgia of like this lost time of like the 1950s. I mean, that looks really pathetic to everybody else. That's why it's really funny. These are all like masculinity, manly account. They're posting pictures of Charles Bronson or something, and they're talking about the 1950s. Like, it's just all distraction. And women need to be this level of perfection, otherwise they're not worth your. And the lists are always completely ridiculous. um, yeah.
And they're outside of the current culture. You know, like you've made some good analogies to architecture, how people say, you know, traditional architecture was more beautiful. And but you look at what the modern buildings are being built for and what they're used for, and it's within the context of the day we live in. And that's what people miss when they look at sort of the nostalgia porn or whatever they want to call it.
Yeah.
It's all outside of the context, and a lot of it's not even true. I mean, but even the parts of it that are true, like, oh yeah, you could let your kid go in the neighborhood for 6 hours because there was nobody freaky around, you know, stuff. But they also miss the fact that we're building rockets that are going to take us to, you know, the next stage of human evolution, and you know, we're going to have robots and, you know, artificial intelligence and all these things.
Oh no,
And
dude, AI is going to take us over. Didn't you hear Sam Harris?
yeah, right,
He's
yeah,
totally
yeah.
logical. I know he's logical because he's boring.
Mm-hmm.
That means he's smart and logical, Hutton. That's how
uh
that's how it goes.
Sam Harris seems like one of those guys that we might uh let's just say we might hear an interesting story that we're all shocked about one day. He's on my list. He's what was the uh uh oh gosh, I'm gonna kick myself. David, the self I shouldn't even tell the story, but we could hear an
What,
interesting story
he
about
hanged
Sam.
himself? Some guy?
Yeah, David, the karate guy, you know, Oh, it's gonna kill me as soon as I get off here. But
Um,
Sam Harris is one of those guys that I get the sense he's just kind of just barely hanging on by a thread. But um the
yeah. Yeah. So I think that's another example of people just coming up with crazy stories. And, great example is just like the self-driving thing that was happening in San Francisco. They had these cars, and it's just like everybody jumps all over how issues that the cars had and all this stuff. Meanwhile, they're totally missing the fact that this is the same kind of technology that made airplane crashes and airplane deaths essentially non-existent ever since it was implemented in airplanes in 2000. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be problems at first. Yeah, you can figure out, you can put a traffic cone on the hood in a certain spot and it's not going to know what to do. Like they can't figure out a way around that. It's yeah. Yeah. Well, people are anxious. Nobody tells them how to deal with their anxiety. You necessarily must come up with these things. You necessarily must start a Twitter account called Teach Your Son Blank and think all you have to do is give your son a certain instruction.
Mm.
Right? I think life gets, look, we love certainty. Right? If you're feeling anxiety, you really can't feel certain. I think it's okay, once you understand anxiety and you have a better relationship with it. But if you're not comfortable feeling that, your reaction must necessarily be teach your son blank, and then you're going to start saying stuff that's embarrassing. You go to the your dinner table with your family at Thanksgiving, and you're going to just pray none of them have seen your Twitter account because of all the ridiculous things that you've said. Not you, but just like these are natural reactions to, I think, pretending to be emotionally cut off. And I guess we're picking on the red pill manosphere, but
Well, they don't even have kids and they run accounts called Tell Your Son This, which is even funnier.
yeah. Yeah, but I
But
mean, I guess that's a thing, right? Like people not living the life that they portray on social media.
right.
And yeah, but people always think of, Facebook moms or whatever, just showing the 5% of their life, like the 5% when the kids aren't crying, just take a picture of the kids, then put it on Facebook. But it's, yeah, guys pretending to, and so, it's so obvious to me, not like I was some stud with woman or anything, but it's like some of these tweets about women, I think, no, you have not interacted with a woman in the past 6 months. There's no way you would write that. There's no way you would have this view. I mean, this is like this isolated, self-contained view that makes you feel really good and powerful to tweet it and to say it. And you're probably going to get likes, especially if like you trigger guys' resentments. They're going to give you likes and retweets for it. But yeah, it's all a distraction. Microplastics, like dude, I that was your. I mean, I've seen it, but I saw you on Twitter post point that out, that that's just like a totally ridiculous thing. And again, one of those things, like maybe there's some truth to it, but what's really the issue in your life? The resentment that you, like microplastics, or the resentment that you have around women,
Yeah.
that you don't even see it as resentment to you. I mean, it just looks like reality. I know it's tough talking about this stuff and emotions and how they affect you and like the consequences of them.
Mm.
I just want to say things in a bunch of different ways, and maybe it'll like trigger people and go, oh, okay,
No, that's how it
maybe that
works.
is how it is. Maybe it's not red pill versus blue pill, or feminism versus red pill, or the manosphere. Maybe it's not woke versus, or Republican versus Democrat, Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia. Maybe it's not that. In fact, a lot of these false alternatives, these false dichotomies that are offered to you, are a cover for this exact thing. At the same time, you can point out atrocities that Hamas has committed against Israel, and that's all real. It can be more than one thing at a time. And
Right. And relationships, the other kind of underlying current is that relationships really are hard, especially, a man woman relationship. I mean, being married is not the easiest thing in the world. It takes a lot of self awareness and the
yeah,
ability, all the things we talked about that are hard for guys to develop. That's exactly what you have to have in a marriage to sort of make it work. Because when you go into a marriage, you're both imperfect. And then suddenly you find yourself not only with your own shit on your hands, but you find yourself dealing with their shit too, because your lives are sort of, intertwined. And
Yeah.
so when it doesn't work and guys get a taste of that in dating and relationships, they don't even have to be married, but they get a taste of that and they're like, holy God, I mean, the opposite sex is crazy. I mean, all the single guys I know, because I'm in a group right now that is just younger. They're not super young, but they're younger than me. They're single. And you can tell they're kind of nervous that they're ever going to get married and have children. They want that, but they're kind of worried that it's going to happen for them. Um, and and I'm not here to give a silver bullet for that problem or fix it, but I know that you're dealing with your stuff and your wife's stuff, or your girlfriend, or whatever the case may be, or your boyfriend, I guess. But it gets even harder when you lack the self awareness to take responsibility for your own stuff. It gets way harder when you have somebody else's that you're intermeshed with. That's what I find myself asking the question all the time with my wife is like, is this something that I'm dealing with, or is this something that she's dealing with, or is this something that sort of we're kind of on the same boat, kind of dealing with together? Um, it just sort of opens you up. The wife and children thing just sort of opens you up in a way that leads to those existential crises if you're not able to manage that stress or manage that anxiety or be open to those sensations. The vulnerability, I think that's what it is. Now that I talk through it, you feel more helpless and vulnerable in a lot of contexts. The guys don't want to feel that way. That's the same reason that guys don't go to therapy. And when you have children, you're putting part of yourself out there into the world, and literally, it's like, you know, you have to be able to manage those vulnerabilities in a way that you never sort of dealt with before. And I think that's sort of the big picture, but it's just smaller pieces all through the sort of the dating progression from the time you meet a girl to the time you start dating and everything. You're just increasingly vulnerable, and that's what guys don't want to. That they don't want to feel vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the commitment, right? I mean, the commitment is to the relationship, which means an ever growing uh vulnerability. What would just say transparency? That's a guys like that word better. It's just transparency. Just yeah, I mean, guys, single guys are always like, oh, it's so scary to approach women, you get rejected. And now looking back, it's like if I'm like walking by a woman at the mall, I just think, oh my God, that's so easy. That's
Mm.
nothing. I mean, nothing is on the line. Like, yeah, you kind of feel like an idiot if you mess up, but you think you have to stop approach you got to stop approaching women. No, you need to approach your wife over and over again. I don't just mean sexually, I mean I do, but I also mean with just like serious issues and you know issues that when you bring up you kind of look at yourself and you're like, who am I? Right? You don't really get much of that when you're just talking to whatever, some girl at the mall or in a Starbucks or something. It's like, no, you need to talk to the girl in the Starbucks because 10 years when you're 40, there's going to be an issue in the marriage and it may not even be your issue. I mean, I've watched Sleeping Beauty like 50 times in the past week. And it's like, yeah, like this dragon, this curse, right? That left some places on Aurora. Like, did Prince Eric has to, or Prince Philip has to come deal with it, right? He's the one. And I just think it's like, yeah, you got to deal with her trauma and it's tough. It makes it tough when I think there's a lot of accounts online saying, "Oh, if your wife doesn't do A, B, and C and greet you with a whiskey and a sandwich as soon as you get home, then something's wrong, or you're a simp." And man, I get the feeling like if I was your age, I never would have gotten married because that stuff really would have worked on me. Like the kind of advice that's like, if there's 1% doubt, then there's 100% doubt. I could have picked apart any relationship, you know, and I definitely did. I mean, that was like a huge part of my defense mechanism, and feeling self-righteous and my separation from my own emotions and women. And yeah, it's too bad because I think we're both talking about it. The implication here is that if you're a guy, you want to get married. That's what you want. And if you're 21, I understand that doesn't make sense right now, but this is where you're going, right?
Mm.
This is why you're dating Stacy in bio or something. Is because you're working on this because you don't want to get to 40 and not have these connections in your life. Because nobody cares about a 40-year-old man unless he's married and has children. Nobody cares. And you really got to be aware of that. And it's called the wall, but men have it too. We all have it. There's a wall called death. And yeah, this is what you have to work on. And I understand the techniques can work and make you feel really powerful, but that could be a real issue for you.
Well, that was what was good about your stuff, though, is because most of the issues that you have with a woman in a relationship are a reflection of something that's your own issue, you know, either directly. I mean, you guys may have a lot of couples will have literally the exact same problem, right? With a certain
Oh
thing.
yeah.
But even the ones that aren't maybe the exact same thing, um, it really is just a reflection of your issue. You're not going to marry a girl who is on another level of development than you. I think a lot of guys have that fantasy that they're gonna meet, maybe they're out of shape and they're gonna marry a fitness model. Nope, she's gonna be on the same emotional wavelength as you.
Yeah.
She's gonna be a similar, maybe if you're lucky, she's a little better looking than you, or something like that. But whoever you wind up with is gonna be, I mean, basically the female you, for lack of a
Yeah.
better,
Emotional maturity wise, definitely.
right, emotional maturity wise.
And sometimes that's hard to see because the dynamic that I see a lot is the tuned out, emotionally tuned out guy. Right. I mean, that's the thing. These guys go into the manosphere and they become emotionally tuned out, and they're that much more likely to get sucked in by
Yep,
borderline girl
yep.
because she exhibits exactly what they lack, this emotional sensuousness and expression. It's all
Mhm.
unhealthy, it's very toxic. But you keep seeing guys who definitely know better and are smart enough to know better, but they get sucked into these relationships, but it's not up to them. They put themselves in a place where you couldn't say no. There was going to be a compensation for your past 18 months of monk mode.
Mhm.
And this girl shows up who's bored. I mean, she's not even your type, she just doesn't even look that good, but you don't even care anymore.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think guys are, there's a lot of pushback against the red pill. I don't think anything we're saying is too controversial. So that's good. But yeah, I think there's that lack of guidance, not just with men, but a lot of people, feminists, a lot of people who can't manage emotional issues and project them out and on society or something else, a strange compulsion or obsessiveness.
Mhm.
And yeah, I just think people need guidance out of that. The red pill is one manifestation, and I think that's why it's so fascinating, is because I think we all go through it to some degree. I definitely went through my version. Again, I mean, think that who knows where I'd be if all this stuff was on the internet when I was 22. I just went through my serious young man phase and just read a lot of philosophy, so it's like not that bad, all things considered. But yeah, there's a lot of destructive stuff out there, and I don't know, just trying to add some balance. So it's good to have you on and listen to your experience. But any I don't know if it's advice or what would you tell? People often pose on Twitter like what I would if I could say 5 words to my 18-year-old self. Like what would I tell him?
The
If you could say
might,
something to yourself when you're getting on the red pill, what would you tell yourself?
yeah. To my 18-year-old self, I would say that emotions are real.
they
uh,
they do affect you. It is who you are.
yeah,
It really is.
you're
It's
not
part
a
of your identity.
you're
And
not a
until you acknowledge
sociopath.
that, you're not going to develop. I'm sorry, I'm ranting.
No, 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 no. You're totally right. I was just saying you're not a sociopath just because you don't experience things that maybe you hear other people say that they experience in a certain way. That doesn't mean you don't have those things. Okay. And again, I'm just talking to my 18-year-old self.
Yeah.
I'm a particular personality type. Um, but don't think you know more than you know. I think young men, my kid is turning 6 in a week and he's already a mansplainer. He it's amazing what he'll say he knows. You know what I'm saying? because he trusts that he can figure it out. I mean, that is a masculine trait.
Yeah.
And but I would say to my 18-year-old self is that you really don't know what you don't know. I used to get mad at like Sean Hannity when I was like when I listened to that kind of stuff, because they were like, oh, well, you're not really a man until you're 28 or 30 or whatever. And I was like, no, I'm 20 and I can take care of whatever I want to take care of, because I was only focused on those things. I didn't have a counterbalance. So I think over too much trust or too much confidence in what I thought I knew and not enough humility, I think really put me through a lot of pain, a lot more pain than I potentially you know would have necessarily had to experience would I had a little bit a slower hand and a little bit more patience and humility and those types of things.
Yeah. Too bad your 18-year-old self would not have listened.
No, there's no way.
There's nothing you can communicate.
I know.
Nor would I want to communicate. I mean, but where'd be the
It's
fun in that?
it's a catch 22. I think all you can do. I spend a lot of time thinking about this because I do have children, but I think all you can do. I think my parents did this to an extent. That's why I was able to sort of look around and pull myself out of some places. It just sort of put in a foundation there. Just give maybe some of the tools, or some of you just a little bit of a little bit of awareness around some of the empathy tools and things that I think that come into play later. But you can't tell an 18-year-old guy that they don't, they're not in love with their girl. I wish somebody would smack me silly when I was dating my high school girlfriend. It was ridiculous. Um, but there's probably nothing that could have been done. So
No, you got to go through it. You got to feel the pain. Yeah. Well, good. Good talking to you. That's all I wanted to cover. The red pill, just watch out for it. Just watch out. There's a lot of dark side there. Not everything that you hear. The other thing is just having a family is fun. Like
oh
it's
yeah.
actually a good time.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people and I guess I just kind of did this too. I pose it as like this thing that's good for you, which I guess it is. And if like, you know, that's going to be if connection really is at the root of at least the willingness to grow and change based on like, what humans are, having a nuclear family like that's going to be your best source of connection.
Hmm.
It's not going to come from anywhere else until we're a different species. I guess I'm saying the same thing, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun and kids are a lot of fun. And yeah, you get to see your 6-year-old son just say something with total confidence. And you probably look at him. I could imagine like, oh man, it's just like pure, unfiltered confidence. He probably says no in like a very decisive way. Like it's the most comfortable thing in the world, for him to say no. You're like, oh man, it's like this nugget of a human.
Hmm.
Not a lot of healthy guidance there yet if he's 6, but it's like it's there, the energy's there, like you see it.
Hmm.
And there's really nothing like that's a really cool thing to see, but you're not going to get there unless you can connect emotionally with women. It's not going to happen.
It is a lot of fun. I mean, it's the lifestyle that I like and that I think is the best for me. And I think a lot of the guys, and again, I talk to guys that I'm fairly close with, but I think people intuitively know that, right? Like I think most people on some level want to get married, maybe not have a big family or something, but it's a lot of the people that say they don't, it just comes off as not real. Just they seem like it's just not genuine. Oftentimes you
Well,
can.
I said that for a decade plus, and based on my awareness at the time, I was telling the truth, but I just wasn't aware. I just lacked the ability to have that connection, the foundation of which is like a marriage. I don't know if I have it now. I know I have more of it than I had when I was 25. I could get divorced next week. I don't know, but
Yeah,
at least I have more of it. I'm working on it. I mean, um, so yeah.
we'll try.
Great, Hudden. Well, thanks for coming on. Any do you want to talk about where people can find you?
Nope.
Okay. Good. Well, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you for your honesty. That's always great content. And yeah, take care.
Likewise, thank you.